Bhagavad Virya Sambhavat Kriya Shaktir Ahankaras Trividaha Samapadyata Mahattvatvad Vikurvanat Bhagavad Virya Sambhavat Kriya Shaktir Ahankaras Trividaha Samapadyata. Read text 24. Vaikārikastaijasascha tamasascha yato bhavaha manasaschendriyanam cha bhutanam mahatamapi. Word to word meaning, please repeat. Mahat Tattvat, from the Mahat Tattva. Vikurvanat, undergoing a change. Bhagavad Virya Sambhavat, evolved from Lord's own energy. Kriya Shaktihi, endowed with active power. Ahankaraham, the material ego. Trividaham, of the three kinds. Samapadyata, sprang up. Vaikārikaham, material ego in transformed goodness. Taijasaha, material ego in passion. Cha, and. Tamasaha, material ego in ignorance. Cha, also. Yataha, from which. Bhavaha, the origin. Manasaha, of the mind. Cha, and. Indriyanam, of the senses for perception and action. Cha, and. Bhutanam Mahatam, of the five gross elements. Api, also. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The material ego springs up from the Mahatattva, which evolved from the Lord's own energy. The material ego is endowed predominantly with active powers of three kinds: good, passionate, and ignorant. It is from these three types of material ego that the mind, the senses of perception, the organs of action, and the gross elements evolve. Purport. In the beginning, from clear consciousness or the pure state of Krishna consciousness, the first contamination sprang up. This is called false ego, or identification of the body as self. The living entity exists in the natural state of Krishna consciousness, but he has marginal independence, and this allows him to forget Krishna. Only pure Krishna consciousness exists. But because of misuse of marginal independence, there is a chance of forgetting Krishna. This is exhibited in actual life. There are many instances in which someone acting in Krishna consciousness suddenly changes. In the Upanishads, it is stated, therefore, that the path of spiritual realization is just like the sharp edge of a razor. The example is very appropriate. One shaves his cheeks with a sharp razor very nicely, but as soon as his attention is diverted from the activity, he immediately cuts his cheek because he mishandles the razor. Not only must one come to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness, but one must also be very careful. Any inattentiveness or carelessness may cause fall down. This fall down is due to false ego. From the status of pure consciousness, the false ego is born because of misuse of independence. We cannot argue about why false ego arises from pure consciousness. Factually, there is always the chance that this will happen, and therefore one has to be very careful. False ego is the basic principle for all material activities which are executed in the modes of material nature. As soon as one deviates from pure Krishna consciousness, he increases his entanglement in material reaction. The entanglement of materialism is the material mind, and from this material mind, the senses and material organs become manifest. Leave the door closed. Om Ajnanathmirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam tam sajivam sadvaitam savadutam parijana sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostude Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Based on the thought-provoking questions of Mother Devahuti, the knowledge of Sankhya is being presented by Lord Kapila, the effect of which the hearing the Sankhya philosophy, the effect of that hearing, what you get is you become situated in your transcendental position, you become free from the effects of the modes, and you are able to cut the knot of material attachment. So these are the benefits of hearing this Sankhya philosophy. After getting this inspiration to hear, we have seen the discussion progressing in the form of question and answers. Mother Devahuti wants to know more about this Purusha and the Prakriti, and then the transformations of Prakriti, the interaction between the Jiva, Prakriti and Ishvara. So, the Lord is also the Supreme Purusha. Jivas are also called as the minute Purusha. because the jiva is minute, the independence which is discussed in today's verse, there is always a chance of misusing the independence. When that happens, the jiva is covered by avidya. So you have lost your spiritual identity, which is your pure identity. Now you are given a false identity. And then you start acting based on that. Then, because you are given that false identity, you start thinking, acting, willing, desiring, all of that based on that false identity. So the jiva gets bewildered and he thinks he is the doer of the activities. Then he becomes entangled. Now this describes the entanglement of the jiva. Now Mother Devahuti also wanted to know more about the characteristics of Prakriti and the Purusha. So when describing the characteristics of Prakriti in the unmanifested state, it's called as Pradhan, and when it starts to manifest, it is called as Prakriti. Then it goes through transformations based on and empowered and activated by the Lord's glands through the time factor, and the jivas are being injected into the matter which is being getting transformed by the glands of the Lord. And then we saw how the fear of the time factor, because Ishvara controls Prakriti and Ishvara also controls the jivas through time. Prakriti controls the jiva. If the jiva wants to be bound and he desires material sense gratification, Prakriti binds the jiva by giving varieties of enjoyment. So, what are the varieties of enjoyments which the material nature offers, and how these varieties are being created? And that's what is being described in sequence now. Because the jiva has the desire to enjoy, but he has to be given facilities according to what he deserves and desires. The sanction is given by the Lord, and in Mother Prakriti, she gives the variety. Now, how is material nature transforming and giving various set of varieties? That's being described in this set of verses. So, agitated by the time factor, the transformation is happening, where you can see from Pradhana to Mahatattva. The Mahatattva is undergoing further transformation. In Sattva Guna, it's called Mahatattva, and in Rajoguna, it's called Sutra Tattva. So, in this particular verse for today, the Mahatattva transforming into Ahankar, that's being discussed. And within that, there are three types. So this Mahatattva transforming into Ahankar, and then from Ahankar, which is predominantly in ignorance. So that's where we understand this material nature, material world is a place of temporality and filled with miseries, because the basis of that is Ahankar, the ignorance. And from that ignorance, predominantly in ignorance, Ahankara, from that, within that, goodness, passion and ignorance again arise, and Ahankar in the mode of goodness gives rise to the mind and the demigods. So Ahankar in the mode of passion gives rise to intelligence, the life air and the senses. And Ahankar, if it's overpowered by ignorance, then from that you get the sense objects and the five great elements, Pancha Mahabhuta. So that is being nicely described in this particular verse. about transformations happening. And in this particular purport, Prabhupada is making this very strong point and then also raising a doubt and later clarifying the doubt. This is like a standard way of explaining. You make a thesis statement, then you raise doubts on that same statement, taking the role of an opponent, and you also give arguments to support the opponent's point. Then you come back, clarify that doubt, and clearly establish your Siddhanta by giving Shastric and real life example and restate the thesis statement that you have made in the beginning. So that's what Prabhupada is doing here. From clear consciousness or pure state of Krishna consciousness, the first contamination sprang up. That is called false ego or identification of the body as the self. So then he raises a doubt as to how from the pure state, how did false ego come up? When the living entity, even though living entity is in the body of Mahavishnu, it still doesn't lose its independence. That's how the soul by nature is insoluble. So when we say the soul enters the body of Mahatattva at the time where it's in a dormant state, so at that time the independence of the jiva is still not taken away from the living entity. So now the creation is happening and all the transformation, matter is going through the transformation, even though the jiva is covered over by the various layers of avidya, the coverings in the mode of goodness, passion and ignorance, and you are given a specific designation according to the modes that you are mixed modes. You are given a designation of a male, female, Brahmana, Vaishya, Kshatriya, all of that. Still, the independence of the jiva is never taken away. The jiva never loses his independence. The independence is being overpowered by the illusory energy, but it's not completely taken away from the jiva. If it is completely taken away from the jiva, then Prakriti will take full control and jiva will not understand his role and he will not be able to come out of the entanglement at all. If the free will is completely taken out, then he can't function. He can't function meaning he won't be able to come out of this entanglement at all. So the Lord, being merciful, would not want to put the jiva in a precarious situation by taking away jiva's independence. So this particular factor explains why the jiva, when misuse of independence, that's when the contamination happens. And from that contamination, the first contamination, the false ego is coming up. So this explains the misuse of the marginal independence, and because there is independence, there is a chance of misusing the independence. You properly use, you remember Krishna. You misuse, you forget Krishna. And then once that step is taken, after that, jiva doesn't have control over what's happening. Till the point you properly use or misuse, if you misuse, then material nature takes over and the set of reactions happen. That's why the example is given here of that of jiva trying to enjoy. Then the misuse of independence happens, and then the example of proper use of a razor to shave the face and the misuse of the razor to cut. Both the things are there parallelly. How the jiva uses the independence, that determines the outcome. After having explained that point with the Upanishadic example, Prabhupada gives a practical point about one should not only come to the stage of pure consciousness, but one must be very careful. Because there is always a chance of misuse, one has to be careful. Any inattentiveness or carelessness may cause fall down. So false ego makes you identify with the body and makes you think that you are the body. And because you are identifying with, so Jiva is identifying with Prakriti and thinks that he can enjoy from Prakriti. So therefore he is coming under the influence of time and Prakriti. So therefore he is gradually falling down from his actual position. So next Prabhupada explains, from the status of pure consciousness, the false ego is born because of misuse of independence. We cannot argue about why false ego arises from pure consciousness. Factually, there is always a chance that this will happen, and therefore one has to be very careful. Now the next point Prabhupada makes in the second paragraph is the sequence of events that happen after a jiva misuses its free will. He says, as soon as one deviates from pure Krishna consciousness, so you're in the crossroad of making a decision, pure Krishna consciousness or material enjoyment. So if you are, as a jiva, you're connecting to Ishvara through the path of yoga, then what happens is the effect of Prakriti and time, that influence reduces. But if you're going the other way, you're deviating, then you are coming more under the control of Prakriti and time. So this, Prabhupada writes, increases his entanglement in material reaction. So this is the cycle, action and reaction, cause and effect. As soon as you get into the influence of material nature, there is a cause and effect. There is an opportunity to enjoy, and then there is a subsequent suffering. So suffering and enjoyment are like the two sides of a coin. You can't have one side and not have the other one. But Prakriti, or the illusory energy, specifically Maya, she covers you and entices you with various ways of enjoying. And that origin of that enjoyment is in the mind. The entanglement of materialism, as Prabhupada says in this purport, is the material mind. Because even though there is no enjoyment, the mind thinks that it can enjoy. And based on that particular type of enjoyment that you desire, you get senses and the material organs. So that is how we got this particular set of facilities, the body, the organs to acquire knowledge, the organs to act, all of that. So this pretty much explains and clearly tells us what is happening behind the scenes. If you're playing a sport, for example, you're playing cricket, and you're a batsman, and then you got out by a particular bowler. Then what you do is you go back and then analyze how this bowler is, through slow motion, you start to see what's happening. So the bowler runs as if he's going to bowl a fast delivery, but at the last moment he turns his hands and then he bowls a slow delivery. So in slow motion you can see how the tactics are changing, and you got deceived by this particular action, and of course, so then you got out. Now here what we are seeing is what is happening behind the scenes, and we are in slow motion, we are going through all of this. First this happens, then this transformation happens, then the next transformation, the time factor is propelling, and then it is moving from one step to the other, to the other, to the other. So this helps us to do more of Swadhyaya means you are understanding the self, adhyayan, reading and understanding of the self, swa. And this immensely helps us to understand how we are being bound, to what extent we are being bound, and how do we come back, how do we come out of this. So, the next part of the discussion I wanted to focus on the theme of fall down, because we have covered enough about the false ego which causes the fall down. From having fallen down, should we remain in that particular state of having fallen and get more and more entangled? Or is there a way out? And if specific to a devotee's life, we are asked to follow the chanting process, the 4 regulative principles. If we fall down from that particular standard because of various challenges we face, how do we come back? In the life of a Vaidhi sadhaka, there is always a constant struggle. At one side, he is given the knowledge of the value system which is there in the Shastras, which he hears from the Param Guru, the founder of the institution, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, then his own Diksha Gurus and Siksha Gurus. He hears all of this and he understands how much he doesn't know. He knows about how much ignorance he is into. Then he is inspired to follow this particular value system that is coming down through Guru, Sadhu and Shastra and in the form of an institution. And he takes up the vow to chant and to avoid and to follow the 4 regulative principles, which will prevent him from getting further entangled. So you purify yourself and then you prevent yourself from getting into impure activities. So this is on one side. However, he is got his own conditioned nature, and that conditioned nature is his swabhava, which he is born with. It's got a combination of good and bad qualities. And that swabhava sometimes will pull him in the other direction. So there is a constant tug of war between the value system which Guru, Sadhu, Shastra is giving and against your own swabhava. This is like a constant tug of war. In the Vaidhi sadhaka heart, this tug of war will go on and it will create various emotions, and when the pull on one side is too much, then the sadhaka falls down. And that is what here in this one statement Prabhupada is saying. Someone acting in Krishna consciousness suddenly changes. Why? Because of this tug of war. And he was not powerful enough to control the urges of the senses. He gave in to his conditioning. He gave in to his swabhava, which was bad. And then he fell down. He has broken a regulative principle. He didn't chant his minimum rounds for a particular day. So, how do we bounce back? How has Srila Prabhupada dealt with this scenario with his own disciples? So, I'll be taking points from an article which is written by His Grace Mahatma Prabhu, titled Choosing to Fall Down. And then, of course, Mahatma Prabhu's personal recollection from that video also. I've taken a few points, where Prabhupada has dealt with one of his own secretaries. So this secretary of Prabhupada was very efficient. He was helping Prabhupada a lot. And of course he was overworked. And sometimes he was not able to finish his daily quota of rounds. Parallelly, because he was serving Srila Prabhupada very intimately, to the extent that Prabhupada will come and talk to him when he's typing the letters, when he's up late in the night, Prabhupada will come and ask him, "Oh, are you also having this problem of insomnia, not able to sleep?" And this devotee will answer, "Prabhupada, you are not sleeping because you are Krishna conscious, whereas I am not that Krishna conscious." So, the intimacy of service was also starting to make this devotee more familiar with Srila Prabhupada. Familiarity breeds contempt. So, the awe and reverence which a disciple should have towards his guru, that's also coming down. His sadhana is also coming down. And he tells Prabhupada that I'm not making spiritual advancement, I can't chant nicely, I don't finish my rounds, I feel like giving up and even going away. So Prabhupada, in reply to this, he said, better you stay with me. Better you stay with me. So this incident happened, and then the next morning, Prabhupada's lecture, and then he looks straight at this devotee and says, just try to serve your spiritual master. You can't maintain yourself, but I will maintain you. So Mahatma Prabhu continues to explain this episode that despite being told by Prabhupada, that devotee wanted to leave, and Prabhupada blessed him saying, you can leave. The choices we discussed about taking the correct path and the wrong path, and how from pure consciousness this tendency to enjoy or give up, that's also there, and if one pursues, what happens? And we are clearly seeing this in action in this particular life, in the life of this devotee. So the misuse of free will and the compassion of spiritual master, that's also being simultaneously demonstrated. And the tug of war inside the mind of a sadhaka, that's also being brought out. So in those scenarios, what do we do? Which sections of Bhagavatam to read? Where can we go and take solace? And this tug of war is described in the Bhagavad Gita itself. And Lord talks about a devotee performing the most abominable action, but still he is bhajate mam ananyabhak. Still he is continuing to perform devotional service. You all know that famous verse, text 9.30. Api said, Suduracharo, that's the first line. Bhajate mam ananyabhak. So that's the tug of war going on. Api said Suduracharo, then at the same time, Bhajate mam ananyabhak. At that time, Krishna doesn't say he is not a sadhu, I abandon him. Krishna says still he is a sadhu. Sadhurevasa mantavyaha samyak vyavasito hi saham. So in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, 20th chapter, text 27 and 28, this tug of war is clearly explained, and the Lord gives lot of inspiration. And the disciples of Srila Prabhupada who have given purport, we will go through points from this. How to deal with fall down, what should I stop doing, what should I continue doing, what should I start doing. I've also taken points from His Grace Mahatma Prabhu's article, so let's go through them. Let's look at the translation of this verse 11, 20, 27 to 28. This is Lord describing the tug of war in the heart of a sadhaka, Vaidhi sadhaka. Having awakened faith in the narrations of my glories, being disgusted with all material activities, knowing that all sense gratification leads to misery. So this is all the value system. Hearing the narrations of the Lord's glories, being disgusted with material activities, knowing that all sense gratification leads to misery, this is the one side, but still being unable to renounce all sense enjoyment. He's being pulled on the other side by his own shortcomings. Now, the Lord advises, what should the devotee do? My devotee should remain happy and worship me with great faith and conviction. Even though he is sometimes engaged in sense enjoyment, my devotee knows that all sense gratification leads to a miserable result, and he sincerely repents such activities. The verse is very nice. I'll recite that as well. Jata Shraddho Matkatasu Nirvinna Sarva Karmashu. So having awakened one's faith, Shraddha, awakened, Matkatashu, Nirvinna Sarva Karmashu, disgusted, Veda Dukkatmakam Kaman, Parityage Api Anishwaraha, unable to give up, Tato Bhajeta Mam Pritaha, Shraddhalu Dhrida Nischaya, Jushamanas Chatan Kaman, Dukkho Dargamscha Garahayam. So we are asked to continue with enthusiasm, being repentful of his previous sinful habits. These are the points that are coming out from this particular section of the purport, and the disciples of Srila Prabhupada have also nicely given a lot of very practical points and the internal dialogue which goes on in the mind of such a devotee. So this is the dialogue as described in that purport. By my previous shameful life, my heart is polluted with many illusory attachments. Personally, I have no power to stop them. Only Lord Krishna within my heart can remove such inauspicious contamination. But whether the Lord removes such attachments immediately or lets me go on being afflicted by them, I will never give up my devotional service to Him. Even if the Lord places millions of obstacles in my path, and even if because of my offenses I go to hell, I will never for a moment stop serving Krishna. I am not interested in mental speculation and fruitive activities. Even if Lord Brahma personally comes before me offering such engagements, I will not even be slightly interested. Although I am attached to material things, I can see very clearly that they lead to no good because they simply give me trouble and disturb my devotional service to the Lord. Therefore, I sincerely repent my foolish attachments to so many material things, and I am patiently awaiting for Lord's mercy. So in this particular section, we are given indications about what we should stop doing. And His Grace Mahatma Prabhu also tells what one should stop doing. This is after a fall down, or when you're going through the tug of war, you're trying to come back after a fall down. One should not be too much depressed or too much morose or too much of guilt. What this does is it prevents you from taking positive action from bouncing back. If you have had a fall down, we are already fallen down, let's remain in that state, and there is no chance of remaining in that state. What will happen in the material world? Because it will pull you down further, further and further. So, if the moroseness and if the guilt especially is taking you further down and preventing you from taking constructive action, such guilt has to be given up. So we're looking at what we have to stop doing. So we should not be excessively depressed, not too much morose and too much of guilt. And in that section, the disciples of Prabhupada write about detachment. One should not therefore become a devotee of detachment. I've fallen down, now I'll give up everything, I'll become detached. So that is also not encouraged. So continue to become Continue your devotion to Lord Krishna and don't become a devotee of detachment. That's what they're saying there. What one should also stop doing is to give up this idea that I should give up devotee association. Because how can I show my face after having broken a regularity principle or not even able to chant my fixed number of rounds? How can I go and associate with such devotees? So let me give up devotee association, and because I've fallen down, let me give up devotional service also. When this idea comes up, one should nip it in the bud. This is something one should stop doing. So this idea should be stopped, and implementing the idea should also be stopped. Next is, one should not put a label on himself, and this is what Prakriti is doing. It's giving you a false label. You have fallen down, you are a failure, you are lusty, you are angry. So you're not qualified to practice devotional service. Rather than that, I am not a failure, I am facing a failure. I am not lusty. Lust is an experience. I am experiencing lust. I am experiencing anger. So this helps one detach himself from the emotion that he is feeling and not label himself as lusty or label yourself as a failure. Because if that's the identity you take on, okay, I am lusty, I should become more lusty. I am angry, so I should become more angry. So that's a potential trap where you start labeling yourself. So one should stop labeling oneself. The last point of what one should stop is, as Mahatma Prabhu writes, a very strong and a subtle point. Don't choose to fall down. That minute independence that you have is never taken away from you. You have fallen down means you have chosen to fall down by making wrong choices. So stop having with that desire to maintain those old bad habits, that internal, that still it's there. So stop making that wrong choice and don't choose to fall down. That's actually the title of the article itself. So in the set of things we should stop is too much depression, too much guilt, too much of detachment, the idea of giving up devotee association, the idea of giving up devotional service, and not to label oneself. Now what one should continue doing is being regretful of one's past sinful activities and continue to pray to the Lord. That's the section that I read, which shows the internal mood of a devotee who is that right mood to bounce back. It's there. I know that I have these bad habits, but I'm regretting it. I am praying to you, my Lord, and I'm expecting your mercy. So I'm continuing my devotional service. I'm continuing to be more careful. The next thing one has to continue, it may seem a little contradictory, is after having fallen down, one will not have enthusiasm, but one has to pick himself up and act enthusiastically, even though enthusiasm is not coming naturally after a fall down. For this, Mahatma Prabhu gives the example of how when you have a physical sickness, say for example I get a flu, okay, so I'm getting nice hot soup, I'm getting to sleep in a warm quilt and a bed, and it's all nice, and I'm having fever and I'm enjoying all of this, and let me be in the feverish condition for the rest of my life. Do we think like that? No. We take proper steps to regain our physical health. Now why can't you do the same thing for your spiritual well-being? So that's how Mahatma Prabhu makes the point. One has to be enthusiastic simultaneously being regretful and enthusiastic. So he gives example from the Acharyas, the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, where they have written songs describing their fallen position, regretting, at the same time having a strong desire to attain the love of God and continue their devotional service in a much intense way. So this Prabhu quotes, this is the mood we need to pick up. Because sometimes we may misquote a portion of the Shastra saying, okay, look, the Vaishnava Acharyas have written so many songs describing their fallen position, so let me sing those songs and remain fallen. No, they have also sang about how one has to bounce back, one has to continue, one has to remain enthusiastic despite being fallen. So, Prabhu advises that fall down itself should give an inspiration and impetus for you to bounce back with enthusiasm, even double your enthusiasm, and do your devotional service in a much more deeper way, in a much more enthusiastic, with more confidence. Because you have gained confidence over the fact that this is one of my, what do they call while driving? Blind spots. I have now been exposed of that blind spot. Now I have to work out, I need to make a plan, how do I overcome this deficiency. So now I know that I'm not as advanced as I used to think as I am myself as. I'm not as advanced. So this will give you enthusiasm and confidence to face the problem that made you fall down. Another thing you need to continue doing is to stay in the association of the devotees. So the glory of devotee association is described in the previous chapter, Satam Prasangan Mama Virya Samvito. That after a fall down, your faith will also go down. But if you stay in the devotee association, that gives constant faith. Shraddhalu Dhrida Nischaya. That Shraddha, it comes Shraddha, Ratir, Bhaktir, Anukramishyati. How? If you stay in the devotee association. What you should continue doing when you are trying to bounce back from a fall down is, you should stick to the devotee association, from which you get the virya, the strength. And one has to work on increasing his faith. So that's something one has to continue doing. So this section is from the purport of the 11th canto verse that I was referring to. The followers of Prabhupada, they write, a sincere devotee of the Lord must be sincerely convinced that simply by the strength of devotional service and the mercy of Lord Krishna, he will achieve everything auspicious in life. One must believe that Lord Krishna is all merciful and that he is the only real goal of one's life. Such determined faith, combined with a sincere desire to give up sense enjoyment, will carry one past the obstacles of this world. So this is something one has to continue. Have more determination, more faith, and continue to endeavor towards the real goal of one's life. So one should also continue chanting the glories of the Lord as described in this section. And this kind of transitions at what one has to start doing. So you continue doing, what should you start doing is to make a list of items that are the situations or scenarios which force you to fall down. This is why the slow motion analysis, I gave the example, we need to analyze it. What just happened? What made me fall down? We should start thinking about how, with the intention to correct ourselves. We should start learning from our mistake. So Mahatma Prabhu advises that one has to brainstorm minimum 3 ways to overcome this particular shortcoming of ours, which made us fall down. Now, for these 3 ways, he says, you also find out potent forms of devotional services that you can alternatively engage when there is a push from that particular temptation. So here is where the knowledge of the 5 elements will also help us. So when there is a push from the mind to enjoy a particular sense object, the air element pushes the sense towards the sense object. So we will read that in the subsequent section. So physically, if you are able to control our breath, when we experience the pushing which is going to make us fall down, by controlling the breath, you're controlling the push of the senses, because air is what is pushing the senses to go towards the sense object. If you withdraw the air, then the senses are not that forcefully pushing you to go towards the sense object. We are understanding it from a philosophical level, from a psychological level, and from a physical level also. So that when your physical body is pushing you to move towards the sense object and fall down, by slowing down your breathing, you can withdraw that power which the senses have to push you towards that. Instead of that, the pushing you recognize, but you push yourself in the right direction, make the right choice, start making the right choice, and go towards the right direction, towards a list of things that you have them handy that you will do when that pushing comes, when that temptation comes. So you have something creative to do when the destructive force comes. So that's how Prabhu explains, you direct that energy in this way. Because energy is there, the pushing is there, we can't deny it, but redirect it in a constructive way. That's something one has to start doing, and that's one of the strategy. This, Prabhu says, one has to work on himself. You pray to the Lord, this is what I'm trying to do, and the Lord will reveal gradually, step by step. And this may take several turns. Like you'll fall down, you'll learn from example, one blind spot is gone, you'll work on it, another blind spot will be revealed to you, you may again slow down, then you bounce back. Like this is it's an ongoing struggle, and Prabhu encourages us that we are struggling to achieve something glorious, and this is a glorious struggle. So one has to carry on with this. So with that, I will conclude today's session. We kind of did a short summaries in between as well, so I'm not going to summarize. So any questions, comments, corrections based on what we discussed today? Yes, Ravi. Jai. Prabhupada ki jai. Now, before you move on to that particular technical things, anyone else has any other doubts related or questions they want to ask related to what we discussed? Yeah, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, the question is, we're in a digital reality, and there are constant temptations. Is that, if I understand correctly, and it's making you make the wrong choices? Yeah. Yeah. So your question is, how do I get out of the distraction of the digital? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So just to answer the question. So I turn on the phone, I choose to go to Vaishnava calendar. I choose to go to WhatsApp. I choose to go to Facebook. The founder of Facebook is not coming and pushing buttons in my phone. Who's pushing? No, just simple question. Who's pushing the buttons in my phone? Is the founder of the Facebook or me? It's me, right? So that's where Mahatma Prabhu says we are choosing to give in to the distractions of the outside world. We can't blame the outside world for our distractedness. The outside world is increasing our distractedness, but we still have our choice. The power of choice is still with us, so we have to be more vigilant. You use it for that particular purpose, and then you come out of it. So we can't blame that and then attribute our weakness to the distractions. So there's always going to be there. It's been there in the past, it's there now, it will be there in the future. The ancient sages faced another kind of distractions. We are facing the same, but the theme of distraction will always be there. So this is where the jiva makes the choice. So is the Lord attractive or is his energies attractive? The Lord is more attractive. All the experience that I'm going to get from this, it's there from the Lord, and he is much more powerful to give me more enjoyment. So let me choose that. So the power of choice, one has to exercise one's choice muscles, as they say, and make the right choice, not give in to it. Yeah? Is it okay? So I'll come back to Ravi's second shloka. What particular word you're asking? Yeah. Yes. No, the ahankara, as I already explained in the previous step, ahankara is going through the transformation, and that ahankara, false ego, is going through the transformation, and within that you are seeing vaikarika. So ahankar in goodness, from there mind is created. So the previous step itself is clarified that it's ahankar. I think I remember sending you the pictures from Subodhini. Is that okay? The ahankara is going through the transformation. From there you get all these. Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll conclude here. Granthar Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhaktivinoda ki jai. I'll forward that article, you can all read it.